Hello, I'm Gretchen Kelly, manager of the San Mateo County Airports, and this is Scheduled Charters, Is It the Wave of the Future? And I'm excited to be moderating this panel. I'd love to take credit for it, but it was actually Jorge Rubio and Bob Trimborn who came up with the panel idea and the topic and selected the speakers, so thank you for that. The speakers today are, we have Robert Olislagers, the CEO of Centennial Airport in the Denver area. And we have David Drabinsky, and I have his title right here, so I get it correct. Senior Director of Revenue and Network Planning of Jet Suite X. So two great speakers, and myself. I already told you who I am and my title. So Robert's going to speak first. The bios for both of our speakers are on the app. So hopefully you all have downloaded the app and you can look at their bios if you want to read about our speakers while they give their presentations. And I'm going to turn it over to Robert.
Well, thank you, Gretchen. Thank you to SWI for the invitation to be here in Monterey. I just talked to our crews back in Denver, and we had 6 inches of snow in 4 hours this morning. So I'm really happy to be here. So, yeah. So thank you. So we're going to be talking a little bit about Part 380s. If you don't know what they are, hopefully when we're done this afternoon, you will have a little better sense of what Part 380 operators are. If you could go to the next slide, please. Is there a... All right, so the big question is, what are Part 380 operators? So we know what charters are, operating under Part 135, basically on demand. And then we also know what 121 air carriers are, scheduled service. So Part 380 operators really are kind of hybrids. They operate on a limited but posted schedule with origin and destination locations posted. And they operate from exceedingly more airports in the United States than we have seen previously. Part 380 actually was enacted as a stimulus package back in the 80s. So the stimulus package we saw in the 2008 timeframe, 2009, was actually the second stimulus package. So it's not a foreign concept, but at the end of the day, it was enacted. Not a lot of folks took advantage of that, and the Department of Transportation never transferred authority over to the FAA. So to this day, the Department of Transportation actually still oversees the Part 380 operators. So how does it work? So essentially, and I refer to them as brokers. Part 380 operator essentially is an independent organization that charters an airplane, and they are responsible for filling that airplane. So they pay the charter operator for the chartering of the aircraft. They're also responsible. And when I say independent, that's how the legislation is written. There has to be a degree of separation. I don't know that that's always the case, because at the end of the day, it is the charter company that gets paid last, and so they want to make sure that they do, in fact, get paid when an entire aircraft is leased to go to a particular location, even if it's empty. So it starts with the broker submitting a prospectus to the Department of Transportation. They, in turn, look at it. If it meets all of the requirements, that application is then approved, and the Part 380 operator at that point selects either one or multiple Part 135 on-demand charter operators and operated on that basis. So it's always considered a charter. When we've been dealing with Part 380 operators for over a decade at Centennial Airport, and we get a lot of calls saying, hey, I understand you have scheduled service out of Centennial Airport. We're a GA airport. We do not have a 139 certificate. And so we're always very careful to say, no, we have an on-demand charter operator that will actually fly a specific location from Centennial Airport, in our case, to Grand Junction, Colorado. So we make sure that they understand that it is a 135 charter operator. For us, that's particularly important. We're actually the only airport in the United States that is allowed to opt out of scheduled passenger service, even with 9 seats or less, without violating the federal assurances. We got that legislation passed back in '03. So we do not allow scheduled service out of Centennial Airport under any circumstance, as long as it fits that definition. So once the Part 135 company has been selected, the broker, if you will, the Part 380 operator will then fill the aircraft, and then the Part 135 operator flies that individual. So the next slide is basically, and you'll see that again, is kind of how all of this works. The Part 380 operator actually starts advertising the origin and destination location and a fixed schedule, and basically really operate like an airline, with the exception of a couple of things that I will get into here in a little bit. But they'll be looking for individuals to travel. In our case, Grand Junction from the Western Slope. Ordinarily, it's about a 4.5, 5-hour drive. It's a little over an hour flight on some of the commuters that we have with our Part 380 operator. $124 one way. Very popular with our Western Slope legislators when they start the legislative season. So, but it's very popular with a lot of other folks, because otherwise you're basically, you can cover your business in Grand Junction or vice versa in Denver in a single day and be back. And that's really the strength of some of these Part 380 operators, but there's some other benefits as well. So they basically fill the airplane. They, in the meantime, will have a contract with Part 135 operator, and then ultimately the 135 charter operator is responsible for carrying those passengers to the location. Real quick, I'm sorry. So this is that, I like pictures. This is the slide that I just talked about. It gives you a little bit of an idea of how this works. So again, the 380 operator should be independent from the Part 135 operator. They book the passengers on that flight. They're responsible for payment to the 135 charter operator. And then the charter operator takes care of it from there. So if you have a large charter operator, they also have to comply with TSA heavy charter requirements. So it's a little different. Yeah, I'm missing a slide here. So the question is, why are they becoming so popular? Well, there's really 4 reasons out there. Number one, we are seeing a significant amount of consolidation among the airlines. But what we're also seeing is the number of aircraft that are changing. And the chart that you see there, the black arrow, points roughly to what is going on with 50-seat aircraft and smaller, or 60-seat aircraft and smaller. They figure by 2030, those will be completely phased out. Those have traditionally, the regionals have been using those aircraft to fill the markets and fill those aircraft. And with consolidation, with the 1,500-hour rule, it's harder and harder to get pilots to feed those markets and to also make it more economically feasible. As we well know, 5-10 years ago, right seat on a regional was paying $22,000. Today it's $50,000, and you're looking at a signing bonus on top of that. So that has really changed the dynamics for a lot of the regional operators and why that has changed. So we see the aircraft changes. We see a lot of the loss of air service to communities. We've lost service to roughly about 140 airports in the United States in the last decade alone. So that has to be backfilled somehow, and that is being accomplished, frankly, by these Part 380 operators. They can operate out of 139 airports as well as out of general aviation airports, and they can go up into just about any size aircraft as long as they can fill those on a regular basis. So what are those opportunities and concerns? And you'll hear more about that here in a bit. Obviously, the opportunities are for the airlines, those Part 380 operators and the charter companies, to backfill where a lot of the regional airlines have left. And I think that's a great service. Not a lot of communities get essential service support, so this is one way of backfilling that service. Typically, the Part 380 operators are allowed to post only 4 days with a scheduled service and an O&D location. Some of the challenges include, and you'll hear about that in a little bit, finding terminal space, parking space. All of a sudden, these folks are starting to operate from smaller airports that aren't always set up to have a terminal, to have baggage handling facilities. Even the staffing becomes a problem. So that's usually left up to the FBO, and you'll hear a little more about that. So from my perspective, the potential for not having any ARF protection, that some passengers may assume that they get the same protections at a 139 airport with 2-minute rapid response and then 3-minute overall response times. The local fire department is what you get, and they may not be on site if they are responding to a structural fire, because that is their first responsibility. That is the case at Centennial Airport, even though we're a very busy airport. We're 22nd busiest airport in the United States overall. Second busiest general aviation. We did about 345,000 operations this year. We do not have dedicated ARF. We get some big boys in there, but at the end of the day, if you're a passenger on a 380 and you're expecting the same kind of response as at an air carrier airport, that's not the case. Ditto for Part 1542 security. We don't have that, but as I said before, if you're a heavy charter, you will have to be responsible for that, for getting TSA. And just as an aside, and I said the broker has to be independent. That's not always the case, and so you could essentially have a foreign entity filling these aircraft, potentially with individuals that fly on these aircraft. If there's 30 seats or less, no security, and so you get to sign one of these. This is Denver Air Connection, which flies out of Centennial Airport. Key Lime is the operator, is the 135. Denver Air Connection is the Part 380 operator. That green part, which is really hard to see, but that basically says you're not carrying any weapons, no explosive, nothing on you. You sign it. It's an honor system, and you board. It's all of 5 minutes prior to departure that you do all of this. So that is not a security verification. Obviously, the 135 charter operator has a requirement to look in the background, but if you're not on the watch list or on the no-fly list, you board, regardless of what you have on you. So, and you can carry all of that stuff. So with that, I just want to thank you for your attention. You're going to hear a lot more, and then hopefully some Q&A. So I want to thank you. If anyone is wondering what the rubber ducky is, if it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, maybe it is one. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Drabinsky. I work for Jet Suite X. I actually started my career with Jet Suite, and I'll get into the difference of those two shortly. But before talking about Part 380 and public charter, which Robert did a great job of explaining, figured it'd be best to give a little breakdown of what Jet Suite X is and how it came to be. So Jet Suite X stemmed from its sister company, Jet Suite, 3 years ago. Jet Suite is an on-demand private jet operator that has a fleet of light jets and charters those out at $4,000 to $7,000 per hour. While traveling around to visit clients and FBOs on commercial flights, we didn't fly private very often, we noticed that there was a major gap in the aviation industry. It is extremely difficult to get to and from smaller airports in densely populated areas. As we look deeper into this, we saw that short-haul markets of 500 miles or less have been declining over the last 2 decades, and hundreds of airports are being underutilized or have lost service altogether. There we go. The ultra-wealthy get around this by paying thousands of dollars to charter, but the average consumer is getting pushed to major hubs as opposed to the more convenient local airports. Jet Suite X is a public charter operator that launched service in April 2016. We sell by the seat and operate out of private facilities and FBOs. Flights are performed by Deluxe Public Charter on retrofitted 30-seat ERJ 135s. The first market we served was Burbank-Concord. Concord hadn't had air service in nearly 25 years. Today, Jet Suite X serves 7 cities across California and Nevada with up to 40 flights a day. In 2018, we flew 10,000 flights and saved our customers thousands of hours of time. Our lead investors include JetBlue and Qatar Airways. Now, the big question, to which Robert has done a great job of answering, is how does Jet Suite X do this? So Jet Suite X does this through what's called public charter / Part 380. For starters, public charter and Part 380 are somewhat synonymous. It allows individual seat sales on charter flights. Part 380 was established decades ago as a regulation to protect consumers from fraudulent operators. Essentially, when customers were showing up for their charter flight 40 years ago, sometimes that plane wouldn't be there and they'd be out of their money. So what the DOT did was create Part 380, and the funds that people use to buy their seats on these charter flights are kept into an escrow account, and those funds cannot be released until the charter flight is finished. So the best way I wanted to start with explaining Jet Suite X, because I wanted to show how the Part 380 process actually works. And it takes three main components. You have your public charter operator, which is Jet Suite X. It's the entity that sells and markets the flights. You have your direct air carrier, which is the entity that owns the airplanes, operates the flights, employs the pilots, and is responsible for transporting the passengers from point A to point B. And then you have the consumers. So I have a similar triangle to Robert's. The top of that triangle is Jet Suite X, which is the public charter operator. And as I said, that is the entity that sells and markets the seats. What that public charter operator does is they organize the flights for seats to be sold on those charters. So Jet Suite X enters an arrangement with Deluxe Public Charter, which is the air carrier that we use. It is a Part 135 on-demand air carrier with commuter authority. And the agreement they enter into is the Part 380 prospectus, which says that Jet Suite X is chartering flights using Deluxe Public Charter. Jet Suite X then can sell seats on those charters on its website with an origin destination along with the times as well. So the last piece is the consumers, is what makes, what keeps me employed at least, is the individuals buying the seats. So then we get into the conversation we have most frequently with airports is Jet Suite X considered a scheduled operator? And the answer to that is no. Jet Suite X is not. The FAA has specifically stated, and its mandates, that Part 380 flights operated with 30 seats or fewer are not considered scheduled operations. There's a variety of reasons for why that is, mainly because direct air carriers that are commercial airlines, Part 121 carriers, the cost to operate with 30 seats or fewer at some of these airports would just be too great. So they wanted to leave some room for operators to fly under Part 380 to fill the needs of what's required to bring service to local airports. So moving on from that is what does it actually mean for airports? And Concord is a great example of that. As I said, Concord has service now after 25 years, and because of our flying, they have qualified for new federal entitlements coming from $150,000 up to $1 million now, and it's changed the community's perspective of the airport. Before, it was an airport for rich people who were either private pilots or had their own jets that they wanted to charter in and out of. But now the general public can actually use their services. Our flights start anywhere from $69 and go up to $700 or $800, depending on the demand for each individual flight. But our service, therefore, is actually achievable for many people to fly and brings the community back to an airport as opposed to just complaining about too much sound. It becomes a tool for them again. I wanted to keep this short because I'm hoping to answer a lot more questions as this panel progresses. So I'll welcome Gretchen up to discuss her piece of the panel.
Thank you. That was interesting. I don't know a lot about Part 380, so I was very interested in that topic. I'm going to talk about scheduled charters from one GA airport's perspective, San Carlos Airport. This is the San Carlos Airport. As you can see, it's small, and it's in a densely populated area. So we're located about 10 miles southeast of SFO, and we're a reliever airport. We have about 400 based aircraft. We're 110 acres inside the fence, so small, 2,600-foot runway, actually 2,621 feet. We just had a survey done, and we grew by 21 feet. So that's significant when you only have a 2,600-foot runway. We have about 15 based aeronautical businesses, plus a restaurant. We've had 4 on-demand based charters at the airport for 20-plus years without community concern or concern from local elected officials. And then we have one scheduled charter, which has caused a lot of community concern recently. And hopefully we're finding some balance and harmony now after 5 years of operations with scheduled service at the airport. And there's high demand for aeronautical services at the airport. We have about 75 people on our hangar waiting list. We have high demand for office space and just space in general on the airport and high use of the airport. This is really what I want to talk about is the benefits and challenges of, and lessons learned really for scheduled service at this airport. I'm not an expert on the subject, but this is lessons learned from my experience and our experience collectively, the businesses, the users, the Pilots Association, my staff, and then we've been working with experts who have really educated us and helped us along the way. I'm going to start with challenges. When our scheduled operator came on the scene in mid-2013, we treated them like any other on-demand charter, which was my mistake. I was a new airport manager at the time, not new to aviation, but new to airport manager. They were a new scheduled charter. That wasn't a good combination because there was, we were all a bit naive. And so we said, oh, we can operate out of the terminal because that's where our charters operate. Now, we didn't have any available space at the time. Again, another mistake, but the terminal building is where we handle passenger. But 3 flights a day turned into 8 flights a day, turned into 12 flights a day, turned into 24 flights a day, and then one thing we didn't expect was our vehicle parking lot to fill up, and then all of the vehicle parking lots on both sides of the airport to fill up, and complaints from all of our businesses on the airport is, hey, my customers can't get to my business because there's no vehicle parking, and there's no ramp space, and there's no terminal space for customer waiting, or, so basically we're bursting at the seams. It happened very quickly. I mean, this business exploded with popularity. Well, we didn't see that coming, and then it was hard to back up from that. At the same time, community concern, noise complaints started coming in about arrivals. Well, we dealt with noise complaints regarding departures, and we had noise abatement procedures for departures. We never dealt with arrival noise complaints or arrival noise issues previously, and we were definitely behind the power curve. We have 4 operations personnel for 2 general aviation airports, and now they were inside the office using WebTrack, which is fantastic, but it's not meant for like running a noise department. Using San Jose's and San Francisco's WebTrack online, the publicly available WebTrack, to try and figure out what these people were complaining about and calling them back, and so our grass was getting long and hangar doors weren't getting fixed, and so this was just a snowball. So additional workload and impacts, we just weren't prepared. We weren't prepared for a scheduled charter service. We didn't have minimum standards that were current. Our minimum standards were 20 years old, and we hadn't kept up with, well, there wasn't a scheduled charter in the area for us to really compare to, but we didn't do our homework, right? So we didn't know what to expect and what type of requirements to write into an agreement with this business. So it became a big problem before we knew what type of requirements to write into an agreement, that would be mutually beneficial. And now the elected officials, the county that I work for, were angry because people were complaining to them. They didn't want anything to do with this business. or really any agreement having to do with the airport. So now, any agreement that I took to them, they took it off the agenda. So now office buildings around the airport started to sit empty. So now we're losing other revenue, right? Because if it had anything to do with the airport, just take it off the agenda. We don't want to deal with it. We don't want angry people to show up at the meeting. So those are the challenges, right? Now let's talk about benefits. Money, right? Because landing fees, once we implemented landing fees, money from the permit agreement, 1% of gross revenue, and the revenue was growing because they became very popular. New business opportunities popping up like ground transportation, support businesses started popping up because this was so popular. Everyone wanted to get in on it. Entitlement, right now we became eligible for $1 million, right? Had we required that this operator report enplanements, we would have become eligible after 2 years for $1 million in entitlement. A pipeline for local pilots, dozens of local pilots, fuelers that were working on building hours, CFIs around the airport, local pilots, dozens, went straight from building hours, working as a fueler, to working for the operator, getting hired by the regional airlines, just in 6 months, dozens of them. It was like a pipeline straight to the regionals, which is fantastic for the airport to see that happening. Improved access, obviously, for business travelers, leisure travelers. They're going to Truckee to go see Hardy, and they're going to Sacramento, and they're going to Monterey. They're coming here. Santa Barbara, Hawthorne, Burbank, very popular. And people love the convenience. They don't have to take off their shoes. They don't have to, once we finally got off-site parking, and we got our parking lots back, they just valet park, right? So it's still convenient. And increased revenue, because now the rental car companies love us, the hotels love us, and there's more hotels popping up, and they want to be close to the airport, right? So I wanted to provide a balanced view because, there was a lot of negativity surrounding the operator on the airport and off the airport from my employers. And, certainly some of it justified and some of it not, but I think that, the list is pretty even here when you sit down and look at, the challenges and the benefits, to the airport and the community. I wanted to talk about noise complaints. This is I say a partial snapshot because you can't talk about this issue without also talking about the number of households and including other factors. So this is not a complete picture, but I just wanted to show how, in 2011, we had 106,000 operations, not including overflights, 588 air taxi operations, 11 noise complaints. So we didn't need a noise management program. We didn't need, to spend a lot of time in the office calling people back about their noise complaint. But, in 2015, 31,000 air taxi operations and 4,000 noise complaints. The next year, 23,000 noise complaints, right? So by then we did need a flight management program. We did need, because it exceeded staff capacity. We have a total staff of 9, including me, for 2 airports, and we were not providing good customer service, or even to anyone, noise complainers, or to our base tenants or businesses. So we got vector and plane noise on board by this time. We were working with AMCG and Kaufman and CNS and Kaplan, Kirsch, Rockwell. I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody, but now we have experts on board to help us get some minimum standards drafted, get a flight management program on board, an automated noise, complaint system, so we can actually compile data, start getting some rules and regulations and minimum standards in place, be responsive, get educated, what do we do, right? Help us. And anyway, so by in 2017, at the end of 2017, we hired a communication specialist. And in 2018, you see the numbers drop. Our operator took several months off, but we also had our communication specialist on board, so I'd like to think that helped. It's hard to tell. And then just to talk about money a little bit, we've made $300,000. I rounded the numbers, in permit fees from our operator. We implemented landing fees in September of 2017, so we made about $250,000 so far, just from our scheduled operator in landing fees, about $80,000 in fuel flowage. We started giving out parking tickets. We implemented a parking program, so you have to have a permit to park overnight. We gave out a certain number of permits to each of our businesses, and we didn't even expect that to be a revenue source, the tickets, but it turned out that it is, because we give out so many tickets. During Burning Man, people don't even care. They're happy to pay $35 a night to park, so that's when we write most of our tickets. And then I added lease revenue 0 because when my employer they didn't want to touch any airport agreements during the time that this was such a hot topic, like just don't bring us anything airport, which luckily that has ended, and now we can bring agreements again. We're starting to fill our businesses and do, fill our empty buildings, do some development on the airport again. We're building new hangars and such. But the operator got chased around the airport and ended up subleasing. So, we're missing out on $10,000 a month that they're paying for shared space on the airport. So that would have been nice, but we don't get that. And then I'm not going to go through this whole list, but basically the lessons learned are if we had kept our minimum standards and our rules and regulations and our agreements and leasing policies and stayed current on trends, by talking to all of you guys, then it would have addressed really all of the challenges that we had on that list. But what we're doing now, and in talking to our airport businesses, talking to them about their needs and their changing needs, right? We do that, but we didn't do that with the new business because it was contentious, right? And luckily it's not, and this is several management teams later that we're working with now, and we have a good relationship. But I'm talking about lessons learned, right? And how we got here. It wasn't a good relationship in the beginning, so we weren't talking. But now, fortunately, that's better. But, what we're doing now, additional personnel, right? We have our communications specialist on board. We have additional staffing because now there's additional airfield maintenance. There's additional, wear and tear. So we have more people. We have a lot of help. Our airport businesses are involved. Our Airport Pilots Association has been helpful. We have consultants on board, experts that are guiding us through the process to get all of our documents updated. We're out, I can't tell you how many public meetings we had. Probably too many because, when you don't have things, I learned when we don't have things to report, don't have a meeting, right? Wait until you have things to report to the public before you have another meeting, right? So we probably had too many meetings, but we had lots of public engagement. We have Plane Noise and Vector helping us with technology, so now we have flight tracking and noise management. We're just finishing a Part 150 study that Kaufman helped us with, and tomorrow our minimum standards will go to the board. So it's been a big learning process, but this operator is, we're so small. We have 5 parking spots in our large transient, and in our area where they were operating, so this is 7 Pilatus on a taxi lane that's built for aircraft with 42-foot wingspan on what's supposed to be 4 tie-downs. So it's just, we're so small, and we had issues with bumping airplanes. So we've had to do some work to make sure that doesn't happen anymore, which is why we operate in transient now, which works better. But sometimes we're parked all the way down the taxiway, on Fridays and Monday mornings, and but that seems to work better. And they're an aeronautical operator, so they work. And now they hire our on-demand operators now, and they fly for them when they're extra busy, and everybody's made friends, and seems like for now everything's harmonious, which is much better than the alternative. So that is all I have, and hopefully people will have questions for all the speakers.
Good afternoon, Kevin Dubin, San Luis Obispo County Regional Airport. Several questions, but I'll try and contain myself here. The Part 380 information, very interesting. I saw something there called a participant agreement. I believe it's like a passenger participant agreement. Is that the contract of carriage that you would have in the 121 world, that the customer would have as the passenger on the flight?
I have a feeling that's pointed towards me. So yes, so the operator participant agreement is what's required for a Part 380 public charter operator to have its passengers agree to. And basically what it says is that that passenger is signing up to fly on a charter flight. And it goes over the rules and regulations that that passenger is afforded because of Part 380. If you go to the Jet SuiteX website, at the bottom you can see operator participant agreement, and you can read through everything that it entails. But our passengers are also sign a contract of carriage, which is very similar to what you would sign up, what you would sign when you agree to purchase an airline ticket. So the OPA, operator participant agreement, OPA is what we call it, is what details what Part 380 really is.
So if the customer has an issue with the flight, some quality of service issue, schedule delay, whatever, are they dealing strictly with Jet SuiteX who sold them the ticket, or does the aircraft operator interface with the customer at all?
So the aircraft, in our particular case, Jet SuiteX and Deluxe Public Charter, Deluxe Public Charter is wholly owned subsidiary of Jet SuiteX. So we have control over all of our passengers throughout the entire experience, which makes us a bit different than how other Part 380 operators conduct their business. But how it legally works is the direct air carrier is responsible for safely transporting the passengers on the flight. So they're the ones doing security before the flight, checking bags onto the flight, the flight attendants, pilots, everything about the flight experience is supposed to be controlled by the direct air carrier. Does that answer your question?
And I appreciate everybody waiting for the mic before you talk. I'm taking this one.
My name is John Noble with Aviation. I guess this is for you, David. How do you guys go about identifying markets, where you think that is viable for your service? And then how long does it usually take, I guess, from maybe, when you start the discussions that you want to go into an airport until you're actually able to start flying?
That's a great question. And what we really look for the expansion, to answer the first part of your question, are viable opportunities where we can really expand out of. So we look for airports and communities that are first densely populated, and that we create what's called a beachhead, or call it a hub for better airline terms. Is we look for densely populated areas that do not have a lot of service to local airports. More and more, Burbank is where we have the majority of our operations out of, and there are dozens of airports in California that do not have service from Burbank. So Burbank's a great example of an airport that we really see our future with. The second part of your question, I'm sort of blanking on.
So how long does it usually take from when
Yep.
So the
So
the second part of my question was, how long does it usually take from, say you identify a route you want to fly to, kind of how long does it take, the process take from when you identify that location until you're actually able to start flying?
So I'll back up a little bit to before we choose an airport. One of the most important pieces of that decision process is, does the airport have room for us to expand? Because we don't operate out of the commercial terminals, we need enough space from either the land that we could lease from the airport or from an FBO to grow to more than 3 or 4 flights a day. We want to have room to grow up to 20 or 30 flights a day. So that's a big part of our decision process, is making sure that the space exists. And we've gotten very creative at all the airports that we serve. Everything from renting basically a private FBO from the airport to an off-site facility with a bus in Las Vegas to transport our passengers through the gate at the FBO. So space is extremely, extremely important to us. And then the time frame from when we can actually start service, generally we want 4 months from once we decide on the airport that has the right space and all the qualifications that we look for.
Thank you, very interesting. And I think you've answered the question, but you try to target, and it's either for Robert or Dave, do you try to target airports that offer commercial operations? Obviously, because you're not, TSA isn't screening your passengers, they can't go into a secure facility. But do you try to target an airport on the other end that offers commercial flights? Do people use your aircraft to later board a commercial flight to go somewhere else?
Just to answer the first part of your question is that we actually do not avoid the TSA. We work very closely with them. Deluxe Public Charter is actually the only Part 135 carrier to implement Secure Flight. And Secure Flight is the system that does a background check on passengers when they are buying a ticket on a commercial carrier. We also do explosive trace detection, the ETDs, to ensure that none of our passengers are carrying any explosive devices. And since we are a Part 135 carrier, we are working with other new technologies that allow for less invasive security as opposed to what you go through at the TSA checkpoint. The second part of your question relating to, I'm blanking again, I apologize.
Yeah, and it's probably the way I asked it. But are you targeting airports that offer commercial flights? Are most of your passengers just going to a destination, or are they using it to get to an airport to get to someplace else?
So we do not have an ability to track our connecting passengers. We believe that there are many who do so. Given JetBlue's relationship with us, that they're an investor, we actually have a code share agreement with them. So you can go on JetBlue's website or Expedia or Priceline, buy a ticket to fly on Jet Suite X but you have to do that through JetBlue. We do not track that connecting traffic, but we believe it does exist. And to answer your question about serving airports that don't already have service, we target both. We see our service as being supplemental and additive to what the major carriers are able to provide. So Burbank, Vegas, for example, Southwest is in that market. They have 13 or 14 flights a day, but our service is much more specialized in the fact that Southwest will charge $250, but our tickets will be $800 or $900. And then obviously it goes down depending on demand. But we see our service as being additive to all markets that have service and those that do not. What's going to be great about Burbank for us is we can serve those airports that LAX might only have 2 or 3 flights a week to, or have pulled out of service altogether. So we do foresee seeing all markets, regardless if they have commercial service or not.
Hi, Carl Honecker from Moffett Field. Got some additional stories to tell related to Gretchen's operations. We don't have any problems with Jet Suite at Moffett. They seem to be just a very easy to work with 135 operator from our perspective, but we're not doing the Jet Suite X flights out of there. But to add on to what happened at San Carlos, I've been involved with that particular operator since they came up with the idea. What was that, Eric, about 10 years ago? Anyway, we told them at the outset that they were not welcome at Moffett because we were restricted to only 24,000 operations a year. But they called us this last year and said, hey, can we come there as an emergency divert in case for some reason we can't get into San Carlos? We said, sure, 1 or 2 flights, no problem. That was on a Friday. I show up on Monday morning and there's 12 King Airs parked on the flight line. Come to find out, part of the dirty underbelly of this industry is the relationship between the 380 operator and the 135 operator can go wrong. And in this case, there was a conflict, I won't say why, but the 135 operator that was using PC-12s, a single-engine centerline thrust aircraft that can get in and out of 2,500 feet, was no longer willing to operate for the 380 operator. They had to go get King Air operations, which cannot fly in and out of a 2,500-foot strip. So that's why they lied to us and said emergency divert meant we're changing our entire fleet over to King Airs and we need a longer runway. So that's what happened, but fortunately, because we're a private airport, we had the ability to say, fool me once, that's it, you're done. At the end of the day, they had to pack up and leave. But be careful when you're doing that. We've also had other interesting operations with 737 operators who want to do very similar work in and out of the Bay Area. And what starts out as one flight a day, eventually they start talking about 8 or 9 flights a day, and then pretty much it starts looking like airline operations with 737s and TSA security.
Okay, so I got a question on the security. I'm still trying to figure this out. Quite a number of years ago, back in the mid-90s, you could get on Continental Express or some of these express airlines that didn't have the security there. You would fly down to, let's just say, Denver, and then you would do reverse screening at that site. So I'm wondering, is that what's happening here? I saw the green card that they sign on. Is that security getting on your airline the same security that then gets through the air carrier, or do they have to go through, get down to the other airport, then they've got to get from the FBO, I'm assuming, over to the terminal, then they go through the security at the terminal? Or does this green card that they're signing get them through the system? How does it all work?
Yeah, the green card doesn't get you anything. So the green card basically is your ticket, if you will, and it says on the back that you're not carrying any IEDs, no weapons, no knives, no nothing. So if you are going into an air carrier airport, using a 380 operator, you're going to have to be back screened. So you can get into the non-secure area, the unsecured area, and then you have to go into the secure area. You have to take all your baggage, luggage, and go through TSA. And typically you have to carry, obviously, a ticket, whether that's on a pre-check basis or not. And you just basically follow the procedure that everybody else follows. So there's no opportunity, because you don't get screened on one of these Part 380 operations. Now, in their case here, it's very unique that they do some security background check. I don't know that, in fact, I don't know of anyone that does that in the Part 380 world. So I'm pleasantly surprised. I do a lot of security stuff, and so it's always good to hear that. But it's a problem. So in our case also, our Part 380 operator also has a 121 certificate, which they operate out of Denver International Airport. And they don't fly to, their Part 380s to Denver, but they fly to Grand Junction, which actually is a 139 facility and does have air carrier service. And again, same deal, they have to back screen. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Carol Ford, and I think Gretchen was too kind. I'm also the president of the San Carlos Airport Pilots Association, and because relations with this carrier are now much better, but the company that we were talking about was so uncooperative and unhelpful at the beginning. They didn't work at all with Gretchen and the airport administration, and they certainly didn't want to work with the Pilots Association, which tried really hard to support them, because it's an aviation business on the field. But they were so terrible. They worked against themselves. When they caused an uproar because of the way they were approaching and landing and causing great noise, which could have been avoided if they didn't drop the gear in the flaps 10 miles out and then had to add power to get to the field, it would have been a lot better for everybody. And so the people on the ground, over whose very expensive homes they were flying, got really mad and contacted the supervisors, because you can't have noise over your house at any time of the day, even if it's for 30 seconds a few times a day. So we were in many, many meetings with them, and they were so tone deaf that in one meeting that we were at, they had an announcement of more flights, like 20 more flights a week or something, And that was in the LA Times. So the people that were at the meeting, the general public and the complainers, said, this was in the LA Times that you're going to have these flights. Why didn't you tell us at the last meeting? And they said, we promised the LA Times we'd give them the scoop. Really? I mean, it was so tone deaf. You would have died, Christine. So anyway, we tried to work with them, and then we thought we made a deal with another approach that they could use, and we dealt with the county, and then the county backed out of the deal. The FAA had approved another flight route into the airport to move the flights over the bay from over these expensive homes, and that all fell apart. So now they're only down to about not quite 2 flights a day, which has improved morale everywhere. And it showed in the numbers that Gretchen gave, and so anyway, thank you. She covered her scars.
Yeah, Gretchen, I want to thank you for being the guinea pig in the Bay Area for this wonderful airline that we had. I saw one other question. We got time for one more, and I saw this young man's hand.
Hello, my name is Rafael. I'm a student at Cal State LA. So my question is towards you. It's mostly about the airline, so the route. What's a factor you look at? How do you analyze the route you're gonna do, your destination from point to point? What factor comes into you guys picking your routes? How do you guys analyze that? How do you guys know what schedules, what time fits perfect? When you analyze it, who are you gonna market to? Like, what are all these key points you guys must do before you guys actually start the operation?
Yeah, I think what we really look for is just where we're going to succeed. It's where demand already exists, where demand would be if a new route were to open up to a specific city pair. And then it's the fun analytics with my friend Excel, going through and seeing, what do we have to charge to make a 30-seat operation actually work based off of what the estimated costs are going to be from that airport. So it's really understanding what the costs are and what we think we can actually generate in terms of demand. But awareness is actually one of the biggest battles that we face, not just with our consumers, but with airports as well. Just because so few people have heard of Jet Suite X, so few people have heard of Part 380, and there's also these examples of really bad experiences that airports have had with carriers. And what really makes Jet Suite X stand out is our background. I mean, our founders were we're the founding team from JetBlue. Alex Wilcox, Brian Coulter were there when JetBlue had no airplanes. They wrote the business plan for it. And we are in no way trying to bulldoze over any sort of airport's rules or regulations. We want to work together with airports and communities. That's the only way that Jet Suite X will succeed, is if we actually all work together and raise awareness that there is a new way to move passengers from point A to point B, especially to airports that have lost service in the short haul markets that we're trying to fill.
How about a round of applause for that session? That was a lot of questions. It was very good. On behalf of SWI, we thank you for participating in the session, and just know that we're making a donation to the American Cancer Society in loving memory of Todd McNamee, and that's in your little blue folders that we gave you. We're going to go ahead and transition seamlessly into the next session, and while we're doing that, bringing the next speakers up, Gladys has some raffles that she'd like to do.
I'm going to do a couple of them. First of all, Courtney, our conference chair, wanted me to make sure to thank Brett for all that you're doing, so thank you for keeping it going. So if we want to give him a round of applause. With that said, I don't know if you guys know some of the things that we got to do at SWI is a golf tournament on Sunday, and unfortunately, whoever has to golf with me has a tough day. So I would like to call Justin and Jeff. Those are my two partners. I don't know where they're at. Is Justin or Jeff here? Oh, he must have stepped out already. With that, I will talk to them in a minute. I'm going to go ahead and pull two cards. One, we've got a $50 gift card from SWI. So as the panel comes on up, we'll do that. All right, Kenneth from Monterey Regional Airport, are you here? Very nice. You've got a $50 Amazon gift card. So is Jeff here, Justin? Why don't you come up? Because you guys had to teach me how to golf. So what happened